Hey, it's good to be the king. You know what's king when it comes to media? Audio. Believe it or not, that is the most important thing that you can do with your media. So when you get that audio and it's got all kinds of issues, how do you make it sound better? Well, that's what we're going to tackle on this episode of the Solopreneur Spirit Podcast. Hey, like I said, audio is king, and we need to learn how to make the king look good. Now, don't worry. A lot of what I'm going to show you right now is actually pretty easy to use. Doesn't take a lot of time, but oh, the difference it makes. Trust me on this one. All right, so for this, and I've mentioned this in other videos, but I use Adobe Creative Suite. So I'm going to be editing this in Adobe Audition. If you're not familiar with the Creative Suite, you ought to check it out. It's a really good deal for particularly small businesses and companies because a single license for that is $55 a month, which I know sounds a little pricey, but for it, you get Adobe Audition for doing your audio. You get Adobe Premiere for doing your video. You get Adobe Photoshop for doing your document or for doing like graphics and stuff. You get Adobe Acrobat for putting together your PDFs. You get Adobe InDesign for really designing all kinds of documents. I don't use it, so I can't really tell you what it's about. You get Adobe After Effects is great for adding special effects to your videos. So take a look at that. Rather than buying a whole bunch of different packages and learning to use them, if you look at the Adobe Creative Suite, everything really works together. It's pretty, if you pardon the pun, sweet. All right, so I'll be using Adobe Acrobat. However, if you use a different audio editor, a lot of these same ideas will translate over. You just need to dig through, figure out exactly how to do them, but at least you know what you're gonna be needing and wanting to do with your audio. Same disclaimer that I did when I talked about it in the video. I am not an audio engineer. Did not go to school for this. I have worked a lot with audio, edited audio for more years than I'd care to mention. But most of the effects that I've come up with, a lot of them are just pre-built right into Audition. And a lot of the things have been through trial and error or things that I've read online, tips that I've picked up, and I want to share those with you. So the audio engineers out there, you're going to probably scream at some of the stuff I say, go, no, what are you doing? But all right, I'm not trying to be an engineer. I'm just trying to tell you what's been working for what I've been doing. All right, guys, you ready to dig in? Let's go. All right, so here we are inside Adobe Audition. Now, I've loaded up the movie clip that I was working on. This is, again, the opening clip from this particular episode. But this is just the audio portion we're seeing here. If you wanted to get really fancy, you can also drag it down and get the video reference, but I just didn't really need that. So here it's sitting in the track. We can add multiple tracks here, but I'm in the multi-track editor. Now, the very first thing that I do is add Dereverb. Reverb is, of course, all that echoey sound you get when you record indoors. Now, for this particular clip, I recorded outdoors. I don't really need it, but I'm going to show you how I do this. Now, I use a plugin from Isotope. See, Isotope Incorporated. It's called the RX7 Dereverb. Now, they don't have RX7 now. They've moved on. I've had this for a couple of years. You can get it as part of the RX Elements package, which retails for $129. Now, I know that sounds like a lot. First off, I will say this plugin will more than make up for that amount because it does an amazing job. But the second thing you need to know, Isotope is very famous for doing some really amazing sales. In fact, when I was looking up the retail price for this, they had a sale on it. It was 50% off. So like 60 some bucks. More than definitely worth it. I've even seen some better sales from them. So keep an eye on that. If you're looking to get it, it's not quite in the budget. Just keep monitoring them and find a time that they may actually put the Elements package on sale where you can get it. Now, it comes with a bunch of other effects in there too, but honestly, Dereverb is pretty much the only effect that I'm using from them, and it's just more than worth it. So what it does is it removes a lot of that reverb, that echo, that background sound. It really manages to clean it up. Now, when you add it, what you're going to want to do is make sure you have the default setting, because this is, I had that on something else, but here's the default setting. I don't know a whole lot about this. I just know what works for me. I generally don't even play with any of these sliders. If you want to send me an email and let me know what amazing things they do, that'd be great. I never really was able to get them to do much for me. This is the main one over here. And if you go to the default, that's generally about the right place that you want it. Now, if it's really reverberant, like you had a guest that was way too far away from the mic and they sound like they're down the hall, you might want to turn this bad boy up. In that case, it's probably not going to completely get rid of it, but it will minimize it as best possible. Also, as you add more to this, and I suggest you play with it when you first get it, you'll hear there becomes a sort of a crushing sound toward the end. Things just start to sound like they're being swallowed up by a whale or something. I don't know. It just really just starts to crush down. It sounds a little unnatural. If that is the case, then you want to bring this down a little bit, because the more you add, the more it gets that sound. So you can back it off and find that perfect distance between the reverb, getting rid of that reverb and having that crushed down sound. But again, for most cases, the default is generally right. And I use this on everything. I use this on client podcasts and recordings. Even if they're on good equipment, there's still some reverb in there that this thing will take out and really make it sound like people are in the ears. And that's the point. You want it to sound personal. You want it to sound up close. And if somebody's whispering in your ear or they're talking in your ear and you're having a close conversation, you don't have that reverb. That's why we want to take a lot of that out. So start with the Dereverb plugin. If you don't have it, just work toward getting it, and just deal with it until you can. There are other Dereverb plugins out there. I don't have much experience with them because I love this one so much. I just go with this. All right. So the next thing I want to do is noise reduction. Now you go over here and you pick noise reduction, and adaptive noise reduction I found tends to work a little bit better. I usually go with the default light noise reduction and see how that works. You have to be careful because basically what noise reduction is doing is it's taking anything that it determines as noise, sort of that hiss or anything that's in between when you're not talking, and makes that go away, or really turns it down so it kind of makes it go away. However, in some cases, if you have things that have too much dynamic range, like somebody just gets really quiet, you'll start to hear some of the words get cut off at the end. If that's the case, you're going to want to dial this back a little bit. Whether you can do the fine-tune noise floor and turn that down a bit, or just even reduce the overall noise thing and bring that down a bit. But generally, again, if you choose light noise reduction, I think you're going to find that it really is what you're looking for. Now, they do have a Dereverb single source in here. I've tried it. I'm not thrilled with it. But again, if you can't afford that other Dereverb or it's just not in the budget right now, play with it. Maybe it'll give you some of what you're looking for. So now that we've gotten rid of the noise, because a lot of what goes out is also a lot of like clicks and rustling noises and other stuff that are prevalent when people are not talking. And so that's why we do this. All right. So after I do the adaptive noise reduction, the next thing I do is the parametric EQ. Now I'm going to tell you, when I first started using this in audio, I always strictly used the graphic EQ because that made sense to me. Oh, here's a frequency, and I turned it down. Whenever I would try to look at the parametric over here, under filter and EQ, parametric, it would come in as a default like that. I didn't even know where to begin. But again, doing some research, trying some different things out, seeing what other people were doing, I came to one that I really like, and this is what I'm going to show you here. So the first thing here you have is HP, and this is off. Like if you go to default, it is off. You want to turn that on. HP stands for high pass. The idea about high pass is you set a range where anything below that in terms of frequency. So think of like a singer, let's say like a bass singer who's down low, but below that you get a lot of room rumble, air conditioning, all that. We don't want any of that. So we drag this over. I generally drag it just past the 100 mark, a little bit more. I like to see the bottom of this line registering right around 90 hertz, okay? Now, if you've got a female speaker primarily, that you're doing, or you're female, or it's a higher range. I guess it doesn't even have to be male or female. It's just somebody who's got a higher range voice. You might want to drag it up even more. What you don't want to do is drag it up so much that they get too frail. You want to leave some of that in there. Now, as I play this, you see that it's showing different wave patterns in there. See if I can get a good stop. See how right up in here, this is really high? We're going to want to turn that down a little bit. So I always recommend you take the 2. Once you get your high pass set, move the 2 over a little bit and just narrow that down. A lot of that's going to sound muddy and kind of muffled. And by doing that, we get rid of some of that muffle. Now, number 3, generally you're going to want this one to fall around the 1K mark. See the 1K down there? And I just bring it down a little bit. There's a little bit of mid-range that can get muffled too, and that will take that out. Now, number 4, I really use for something I think you're going to enjoy too. In your room, you kind of have like a weird sound that's just, it's part of the echo, but it also just really drives you nuts. It's kind of the same range that you find like an old telephone. I know, how many of you remember that? But kind of that whole telephone range up in there. That drives me nuts to hear it. Well, that's why I do 4. And I discovered this trick a few months back, and I love it. Play the audio file, turn 4 all the way up, and sweep it until you hear that most annoying thing, which right there was most annoying to me. It really magnifies it, and you hear it. Now that I found where that 4 is, I bring it down a few, and I get rid of that. Okay? How do you make it sound better? And the last thing we're going to do is the low pass filter. Low pass does the same thing the high pass does, except in the opposite. So low pass will basically roll things off before they get to their super high frequencies. This is really crucial because we're going to be adding some effects that are going to really make the sibilance, which is the s, really pop. And if we've got too much in that high end, it's just going to blow it out. So I always roll it back till this bottom is falling just below what I've got going on. You don't want to go too far because then you'll lose some of the T's and S's altogether. But you just want to dial it back a little bit so the last parts here are off and anything that's extraneous above it is off. And that's it. This is my custom setting, and oftentimes when I put the Parametric EQ on, this will pop up and I just make a little adjustments here and there to match the voices I'm working. Now, once we do the Parametric EQ, the next thing we're going to do, and this is fun, is a multi-band compressor. Now, as I've mentioned, I am not an expert at any of this, but I do like some of the presets they have. So bring up the multi-band compressor, and I usually choose the broadcast preset. Now, it really makes things a lot louder. Hey, it's good to be there. Because it's compressing the sound, the top end, the bottom end, like the loudest and the quietest, and bring them closer together. I've generally found, though, you want to do 2 things. When you do the broadcast, take the brick wall limiter off because it can sometimes lead to distortion. And I want to set the output gain about midway between -36 and -48. King. This is pretty much the same settings I use for all. I've tried playing with these, and I'm sure somebody with a really critical ear audio engineer would be able to explain that one better. Generally, I haven't found too much difference that's obvious to me. You know what's king when it comes to media? But what this has done is it's evened out the sound, so it's not as really wide-ranging. The volume levels are a little bit closer together. Now, once we've done that, the final one I do, and this is the secret sauce here, this is mastering. So if you go in Adobe Audition, hit Special and Mastering, it brings up this screen. Now, if you go with the default, that's not a really good one. I always go with their bright hype, but then I make a few adjustments. So the first adjustment I take is, see how that red line goes straight off the end? That's where our sibilants and our high S's and stuff are. We don't want them to really pop, so we're going to pull this down here until that red line points down to maybe -5, okay? We're then going to go over here and see where it's got reverb. It puts this reverb on automatically. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. Audio. Believe it or not. But it puts reverb in there. We really don't want that because we had de-reverb to get rid of it. So let's take that out. The exciter really adds a lot of body to what we got going on. It really excites things. It just makes it stand out. The bright hype, initially I think brings you in at 80, and I like it 80%. I tried 100%. I think it's a little too much, but go to 80% on the exciter. Widener, we're not going to worry about. That has to deal with your mastering for stereo and stuff, and we're not generally doing that with the stuff that we're working on. Here's another good one, loudness maximizer. I bring this one up. That you can do. This does something similar to what the compressor does, and it really brings the volume levels closer together so that your audio is really standing out. Now, it's probably going to make it too loud. So I usually back off down here about -3. This is the output gain. So I'll say, turn the overall thing down about 3. So when you get that audio and it's got all... And if you look at this meter up here, you see it's not in the red, and that's good. We don't want that to be in the red. So again, I don't want you to be able to hear this with me doing it, but what I want you to do once you've added all those in is just play with the effects. Turn them on and off so you get an idea for yourself what they do. Like, for instance, mastering. When I turn the mastering off, everything sounds flat. When I put it on, yes, it gets louder, but there's also more edginess to it and a different sound that just really makes it pop. You are not going to believe the difference between your sound clips before and after adding these effects, and they will stand out more, and they will show better, and it will make your video look better. It'll make you sound better. It will make you sound professional and broadcast level. And it's not that hard. You see, it's just a few little effects I hear, play around, a couple of minutes, and boom, I'm good to go. And once you get a lot of these set, you can even leave them as presets. Bring up a file, load your clip in there, add those in, and again, you're good to go. Now, unlike Premiere, which if you've seen the episode I did with Premiere, each of the effects had to be applied directly to the clips. In Adobe Audition, you're applying it to the track. So any other clips you drop in here will have those same effects. Now, if you want them to have a different effect or adjusted, then you're going to put them on a different track. And most of these effects that I've shown you are also available directly in Adobe Premiere. So if you want to enhance the audio of a video you're working on Premiere, you can do most all of these right over there by adding those effects to those clips and adjusting them very much the same way. And that's it. It's very little bit of work, but it adds so much to what you got going on. Now, if you've got some favorite audio tricks you want to send me, let me know. I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, guys, ask me any questions you got. Give it a try, and I guarantee you're going to love it. So are you ready for your audio to be king? Hopefully the tips that I shared will help you do just that. Keep in mind, the better you sound, the better you look. People get a good impression from you based on how good your content sounds. So let's get out there and make it sound great. Now, if you have any tips that you want to share or you've got feedback on this episode, reach out to wherever you found this episode and let me know. Because as always, I'd love to learn just as much from you as you can learn from me. Hey guys, have a great day.